Hi, everyone. This is Krista Moore, and it's my pleasure to have you on the show today. So it's a very cold and beautiful snowy day in North Carolina. So actually, we're out of the studio, and everyone in this county certainly are working from home today. So we're doing the same. But I want to welcome you all to the Krista Moore Show. And as you know, this show is brought to you by K Coaching and ID Growth. It is a new way to learn from industry experts and thought leaders. And I'd like you just to sit back, kick your feet up, and enjoy our conversation today. I'm really excited about our guest, and I'd like to introduce to you Rufus Stephens. Are you there out there, Rufus?
Hi, Christy.
Hey, good to see you. So I want you to first introduce yourself, and I just love your topic, and I'm anxious for our followers to hear more about what you have to say. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I'm a native of Savannah, Georgia, and years ago left and went north to Chicago. I stayed up there for many, many years, and I retired a couple of years ago after a job as a sales exec, and my wife and I decided that passion was calling, and we relocated here to North Carolina, specifically to Raleigh. And we had no family, no friends. We just felt the call, undeniable call, and we packed up and we came here. I'm from a family of five children and a single mom, and who I lovingly call my street fighter. And she has generated some pretty good kids, and I'm proud to be one of them.
That's great. So when I think about you just deciding to pick up and go to Raleigh, I mean, was there something about Raleigh that attracted you?
Well, we were looking at, our kids are all grown and they're either in Texas or in Atlanta. And we looked at four cities. We looked at San Antonio, Nashville, Charlotte, and Raleigh-Durham. And San Antonio was too hot. Nashville just didn't feel right at the time. We never made it to Charlotte because we got here first.
Yeah.
And my wife is a healthcare professional, and so this is kind of healthcare central in this area, and so it worked for us.
It sure
And
is.
it's proven out to be the best thing we could have done. We met some fantastic people, and some opportunities I never saw coming came to me.
Yeah, and I know I moved here from Pennsylvania maybe 20 years ago, and this is where I'm going to retire. I love North
Yeah.
Carolina.
Yeah.
Great. So I saw you speak at a conference a few months ago, and we had never met before. But I was in the audience, and you were on stage, and you just had me captivated. I'd like you to tell our audience your signature topic and where that came from and what that's all about.
Well, the signature topic is 50 now what? And I'll tell you, I had a pretty successful career. But I always felt undone. While it provided materially, it didn't satisfy. And then when I retired, I just knew there was another calling. And I remember watching some people who had gained a great deal of skill and wisdom. And just about the time when they were at the pinnacle of being wise and smart, they stopped doing stuff. They just cut it all off, and it just seems I couldn't process that. Why? That's the time to do things. You've never been that smart before. You've never been that wise before, and yet you shut down. I can't process that. And for me, I felt unsettled, and I knew there was much for me to do. And just saying retired did not mean that I was going to shut down my ambition. And so I'm still running.
Yeah, but you've decided to be a motivational speaker, so that had to come from somewhere, right?
Yeah, it did. Years ago, I had, of course, being in sales, you always before people making your case, so to speak, and I kind of liked that. And then a few times I had a chance to speak to audiences, and it felt right for me. People would compliment me on how they thought my voice sounded, and I said, great. And then one day, I started to get serious about it, and I started speaking, and I wrote a letter to Zig Ziglar, who is the guru of motivational speaking.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'm proud to say I wrote it to Zig on April 30th, 1991. And Zig wrote me back, and
Oh my gosh, that's great.
with
Yeah.
some great advice about joining Toastmasters, and I did, and I was very successful in Toastmasters. And it just kind of I found my niche. I found my passion, one of my passion points, and it was undeniable. And once I started doing that, I never looked back.
Yeah, so we're going to talk today about some advice that you would give to others and talk about, what are the steps that you went through to discover those hidden talents and that strength, and so that some people can leave today feeling like they can kind of go back and do the same thing.
Hmm.
I mentioned to you my forthcoming book, which is Your 10-Year-Old Self, and we really talk about similar concepts. It's going back and doing some personal reflection on what you were doing when you were 10,
Hmm.
to be able to recall memories that could help you move forward in your life, kind of going backwards to move
Right.
forward. And so that just makes me curious about what you were doing when you were 10.
I remember that very well. When I was 10, I was in fifth grade, and I was with my mother most of the school year because she taught in rural Georgia, and we were in a town called Sylvania, Georgia, and my mother taught for fifth grade, and I was in her class. And that was a year of challenge for me. While I thoroughly enjoyed it, being the teacher's kid brought challenge to me. Everybody was like, it's like I was a gunslinger, and everybody else wanted to try me on for size. And so
Yeah.
I had to defend myself on many fronts, and I got stronger than I knew I could become in fifth grade. And my mother was. Um, she's just excellent in terms of encouraging you to be anything you wanted to be and beat back any negative thoughts and negative things that were sent your way. And so fifth grade or 10 years old was a great time for me. I think I discovered then that I wanted to be into business. And I also discovered that I had a great, not so much skill, but I certainly had an affinity for talking to anybody. It didn't,
Hmm.
whether it was a peer or whether it was an adult, I didn't shrink from it, and it came kind of easily. And I think that was the genesis of everything way back then
Yeah.
when I was
And
10.
when you add a sales career on top of that, it makes a lot of sense, right?
Hmm. Yes, it does.
Yeah. We were talking at one point, and I remember you really just lighting up when you spoke about your mother and the influence that she had on you. What would be some other just really good memories that you think has really formed who you are today?
Oh yeah, she was. You have to remember that my mother, along with my grandmother, raised five kids, and my father left when the youngest of us. I have a twin. The youngest of us were three, and the oldest was eight. And she raised five kids and sent all five to college. And one thing
Wow.
I remembered about her that was non-negotiable. Education was non-negotiable. You will go to school and you will do well in school, and there won't
Hmm.
be any discussion about whether you will or not. And
Hmm.
she was also a provider. She was creative. She had when I found out what she made as a teacher, I just shook my head. But
Hmm.
she never whined. She never sucked her thumb. If she needed to get a second job, cleaning offices or serving tables at night, then she did what she had to do. And all of
Yeah.
that was, I think, bred into each of the five of us.
That's awesome. Sounds like
Uh,
a real survivor and provider and nurturer. Love that.
yeah, yeah. I lovingly call her my street fighter, because there are
Hmm.
no rules when it comes to taking care of her kids,
That's
and
right.
that's the way she fought.
That's great.
Yeah.
When I heard you speak, there was something about it, and I remember passing my card on to your wife. Do you remember that moment?
Well, you know what? I remember the aftermath because it was just a great day. I think we had about 110 people in the room that day, and it was just a great day for speakers. And when we got home, we got in the car. My wife said, "You know, a lady came up, and I didn't know you. A lady came up and gave me her card and said, you should call her. She would like to talk to you about being on her show. And I told her, I said, I know who it is. And I didn't know you. I just know, and I described you to her, and she said, yeah, that was her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And there was something about your presence in the room. There was just very, um, it was clear that there was something special. I can't think of a good word, a better word to say, but that's special about your presence that day. So when she said you, never mentioned you, I wouldn't have known the name if she mentioned it. I knew exactly who it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I felt a real connection as well, and I was pretty close to the front, and I remember
Right.
smiling and shaking my head, which I know is pretty receptive for a speaker to have someone in the
Oh,
audience doing that.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about this theme that you have with being being 50 and now what? And I know it's more of a state of mind, not necessarily the age.
Right.
You know,
That's correct.
this isn't just for people that had a 50th birthday, although that's when it does tend to really sink in that, oh my gosh, like now what?
Well, I just think there's so many now what's to be answered. And I feel saddened when I see people just write themselves off. They worked 35 years for the plant, and just they had to have some dreams and things that went beyond that. But they just says, well, okay, it's I'm 58, I'm 52, I'm 54, I'm 66, whatever. And so whatever always wanted to do can't get done now because the calendar has turned. And that saddens me, quite frankly, because I've seen people who run right at life. My
Yeah,
wife, yeah, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I remember in your speech you talked specifically about people that really came out of their shell, so to speak, or started their own business at
Right.
a late age.
Yeah, my wife's grandmother, who I just loved her. She finally stopped doing income tax returns when she was 92. Just got to be too much, you understand. But just a wonderful woman who said all old age did was just give her a chance to chase her passions, and that's what she did. You know, there there are so many people that I know that pushed the envelope on their possibilities as they got older. One of the ones is my twin brother. His name is James, and he lives in Atlanta. And 2 years ago, he and his daughter, and I love to tell the story, rode their bike. He was
Yeah.
66 at the time. He and his brother, he and his daughter rode their bicycles from Dallas, Texas to Atlanta, Georgia in 9 days, 849 miles.
Oh my
And
goodness.
yeah,
That's crazy.
and they were with two other people, and it was just phenomenal. I know people who say, well, I ride 25 miles a day, but this was phenomenal. And he didn't we were always talking that we really have to remind ourselves how old we are, because the number means nothing, quite frankly. I look
Yeah.
at other people. I look at Clint Eastwood, who's my favorite. I first saw
Mhm.
Clint Eastwood in a cowboy western that came on every week called Rawhide, and
Mhm.
he was Rowdy Yates. And then I see him again as Walt in Gran Torino, as this
Yeah. What
grumpy
a
old
great
guy,
movie.
right?
Yeah.
And Clint just seems to age as a number, and he just keeps running. I love that. I love that.
And
And,
we Kentucky Fried Chicken, the Kentucky Fried Chicken founder,
oh,
wasn't he in his
no.
late 50s?
Harlan Sanders. He was 65, and he had $105 Social Security check, and he started KFC, which he sold years later for $2 million. That's when $1 million was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And the other person that came to mind was probably one of the funniest comedians ever, and that was Phyllis Diller.
Mhm.
She was just a phenomenal woman, and was told by everybody that she couldn't do it. She started at 37, late in life, and in short order, she had written 5 bestsellers and won all sorts of awards as a comedian. And these people are just a tribute to the fact that age should never be a limiting factor to your abilities, or to your
Yeah.
possibilities.
When I think about that, when you were 10, I have to tell you, you've been, when you were emailing me and we were communicating back and forth,
Hmm.
um, you were calling me Christy in the emails. And Christy, no one calls me Christy, I'm Krista, right? But
Mhm.
Christy is my 10-year-old name. Um, so I have to tell you, that was like, wow, he's calling me by my 10-year-old name, and I'm writing all about this 10-year-old self stuff. And I understand your Butch is
Yeah.
kind of your 10-year-old name, right?
It really is. It really is. Butch, and I've thought about that since you and I've talked, and Butch represents my heart. Butch represents my passion. He represents bravery that somehow got nullified or rounded off as I grew up and got afraid of things. Um, but Butch is just a great person, and Butch loves everybody, and that's a lot like Rufus. But there's a lot in Butch that speaks well of the man who I am now. My wife
Yeah,
is.
isn't
I
that
think I
great?
told you. My wife is always telling me. She says. Um, it's like a little boy inside of you, and I always tell her that I hope he never dies.
Yeah. And I love that because we can actually go back and talk to them frequently. They
Right?
can be a good guide.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Let's talk about a bit about some advice that we would give our listeners in terms of the top things to consider if they're at a point in their life or their career where they are feeling stuck, or they don't have that drive that they once had, or maybe they've settled for something less, to kind of get rejuvenate their spirit a bit to continue to follow their dreams.
Well, I think that a few things come to mind, and I think the first thing you have to do, and it's the thing that I did, and I know other people did, and that was to just do some self reflections and start to look inward and just kind of take an accounting of who you are. We have greatness within us. Les Brown is always saying that, and
Yeah.
there's so much good stuff in us, but we take it for granted. Um, Somebody has said something different to have us thinking that we're not as great as we are, and we bought into it. So we need to do some self-reflecting and come away refocused, based on valid discoveries that I am great. I can do at least this one thing very well, and then refocus yourself, and then go apply yourself, but in a
Yeah.
different way than you did before. The other
You
thing
know,
I think. Go ahead.
I was going to say something to that because what it brought to mind for me was an example, but I almost feel like everyone knows that they need to take some quiet time and reflect and go back, but we often don't go there, or we don't spend the right amount of time or the quality of time to do that true personal self-reflection.
Right.
Sometimes I think when there's an event or you're like down at the bottom is when it's a little quieter and you're able to spend some thought time there. I remember when I quit corporate America, I walked out one day and never went back. And I wasn't expecting to quit that day. But
Hmm.
my boss picked the wrong day to tell me to shut up and sit down. And I'm like, I'm out of here. um, but what happened is I didn't have a job lined up, and I was the major breadwinner, and I had to figure out who me was. And I remember doing reflection then. I
Hmm.
remember Googling and praying, and I actually did have a conversation with my 10-year-old self to talk to that child inside of me to say, what do you love? What are you passionate? What did you love in sales? And how can you take that experience that I've had for 20 years in sales and sales leadership and
Hmm.
use it and connect the dots back to what I loved when I was younger.
I hear you.
I think that it is sometimes it is a circumstance or something that kind of shocks you
Right.
into it's time to change.
Well, and I think you're right. It's, sometimes people are impacted by something like you were, and I guess what I'm saying is that, and those will happen. We unfortunately we don't have any control over those. But if yours hasn't happened for you yet, why don't you be the impactor? You become introspective before something forces you to be introspective,
Yeah, like
and
losing
do it.
your job.
That's right. That's right. Exactly what I'm saying. And just make it an act of the will, where you decide, hey, listen, um, just in my case, I had a nice job. I had great people I worked with and all of that, but it didn't satisfy. I came away still wanting, and
Yeah.
yet I had a glimpse of what I should be doing, and that was speaking. And I said all the time, it's like it's like God, and I prayed about it, and it's like God said, listen, I gave you a gift. I can't put it any closer to you than in your throat. And one of these days you will wake up and understand. And I did. I did.
Oh my gosh. That reminds me, I have this little plaque right here. Probably can't read it backwards. It said, God would have never put that dream in your heart if he didn't want you to live it.
There you go. There you
Isn't
go.
that
That's
great?
exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So it is about trying to like dig down and try and really understand that. Um,
Yeah.
I remember when I went back and started talking to my 10-year-old self and trying to figure out what I loved and what I enjoyed.
Hmm.
Um, I discovered some hidden talents, and I think that's as an outcome of what you're talking about.
That's right. That's right. The things just, I think, start to, one of the other things that happens, I think that you mentioned things that people ought to consider doing. And I think it comes in line with what you're saying. Um, is it the skills that you have, start to hone those, work on those skills, pay attention to life, um, uh, get smart about the things that happen to you, and hold on to what you've learned as you push through life, because the day will come where opportunity and preparedness will meet, and you want to be ready for that. And I think that's what happens with I. We came to North Carolina, like I say, knowing no one, and I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I had been working on, and I'm amazed every day when the phone rings, somebody taps me on the shoulder and say, "Hey, listen," or emails me and say, "Hey, listen, this is available for you." And that's one of the things I think that happens when you apply yourself, and just take stock of who you are.
Yeah.
Um, the other
Well,
thing,
and
and
it seems like when you're on the right path, when you figure that out, it's like, oh, this is it. This is what feeds my soul.
that's
All
right.
of a sudden, things start happening to you, and people come into your life. It's amazing how it just kind of expands very quickly.
Yeah, it's almost like a blur, and you want it to slow down for a minute so you can catch your breath, but it's a nice kind of blur.
Hmm.
I think probably the biggest thing that we all have to deal with is, I term it overcoming the tyranny of our histories. Our histories beat us up badly when everybody's got history, and our history beats us up badly if we aren't careful. And I think we just need to change our focus on what history is. History is just past events, information about past events, and we ought to just reprocess that and understand that all it is information that's without character assassination. It's just information.
Yeah.
It's information that can't or shouldn't be allowed to dissuade us from um, our passions or our possibilities, and it's information that really should carry no editorial comment about who you are, who you can be, and
Yeah, but it affects us in a very negative way growing up. When I think
oh
about
yeah,
things that are said to children, or not growing up in a positive environment, or having bad memories, not great memories to go back and
that's right.
reflect on. But it's more about how you overcame those,
Hmm.
or what you learned from them.
That's
And
right.
I love that advice, and not being defined by that,
That's right.
and not letting those things hold you back. And so much of it, I would say, probably has to do with, and I don't know for sure, but I hear this frequently from clients, really about confidence.
Yeah. Yeah, I think once you push past some of that and you see it for what it is, it's just for lack of a better phrase, it's just information. It's really kind of freeing when you cut the cord, and don't allow your history to control you anymore. I mean, it's there's a lightness of spirit. I think your perspective changes every day of your life when you said, "Hey, listen, this is not going to own me." I'll share this with you. I Like I said, my father was an alcoholic, and he was not a part of our life for a long, long time. Well, something happened. Uh, well, probably my mother had been separated from him about 35 years, and he had a stroke. And so she went and got him and brought him. He was in Augusta, Georgia. She went and got him from Savannah and brought him back to Savannah, put him in a nursing home so that she could watch over him and my grandmother, who was in the same nursing home. And we would go visit my father. And I would look in my father's eyes, and you know what I saw? I saw a man who said he was just says one side was affected by the stroke, and he would say, "I love you, I love you, I love you." And I saw in his eyes, boy, if I could just do it again. And all four of my siblings, we've gone to see him. But one day I was there by myself, and he was in a wheelchair, and he didn't hear it. And I just looked at him, and I said quietly, "Oh man, I love you." And it was like a ton of bricks had been lifted from me because I had built up a healthy resentment for him because he didn't do what he was supposed to do. And so when my father died, it was a celebration day for me. But that
Yeah.
moment, that quiet moment with him where I ran at my history is what made the difference.
And there's a lot to say about forgiveness in that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
We were talking a little bit about hidden talents, and do you have any advice for how to, kind of go back and try and pull those back out, so to speak? I've been doing it myself, and it's part of my journey. And when I started to create my new company, I went back and thought, what did I love? What was I great at? And I used to write in my journal every day, and I loved speaking and
Mhm.
reading books, and I would talk to myself in the mirror and read books out loud, kind of articulating every word. But those were things that I did at a very young age. But in corporate America, I never had a chance to do that. I was often asked not to speak. And the only writing I did was maybe emails. So to be able to realize it and then bring it back out and say, okay, I'm going to live my life and create my business around what I love and what I know that I'm fairly good at. So how can other people um, dig back into that talent pool and try and connect those dots?
Well, I think that you touched on so much there because I think the first thing is that life gives you clues. In fact, you give you clues because if you will look at what it's easy for you to do, in fact, you do it almost effortlessly, and people praise you for it, whatever that is, whether it's organization, whether it's cooking, whether it's sewing, whatever. It's something I have friends who are phenomenal at doing a lot of great things, and it just comes natural to them. But they take it for granted. Well, that's
Yeah,
too strong of a phrase, but they don't see it as great as it is. Let me put it that way.
yeah,
And so
that's a good way to put it.
I would say to anybody, just consider what you're doing right now that you do routinely, but you do it excellently. That's a clue of some of your passion points and stuff that just excites you about the process of doing it. That's stuff you ought to run after. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You're good at whatever you're doing, then run after that. Because what's that old phrase? If you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life,
Yeah.
and that's true. That's true.
Mhm. Yeah, love what you do and do what you love.
That's
And
right.
it's great when you can get to a point where, and we're not talking about choosing the right career or quitting corporate America and starting your own business. I mean, some of those things seem almost just insurmountable. But
Hmm.
when I think about what you're saying, is just finding joy and doing what you love.
That's right.
So it might be a part-time hobby. It might be, hey, I used to love playing baseball when I was a little kid, and I dreamed of being in the major leagues. Haven't hit a ball in years, but I think I'm going to go join the softball club or something, or I'm going to coach kids and
That's right.
bring that back out.
Well, and you really have to do it, and I can't underscore this enough, because I think one of the greatest miseries in the world is um, not answering the call of passion, because you know it's calling and you're not answering, or
Yeah.
or um, exploring your possibilities, doing the what ifs. You know,
Mm.
just what if I just tried that thing, but you don't because fear drives you back or the calendar drives you back, and I would say run against all of that and just have a good time in the running.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's inspiring. and I appreciate all of your words today.
Well,
Is there
certainly.
anything else you want to add? You want to add to our topic that you think would be good for the audience to hear on your subject?
Well, I would just say for those of you who out here who just believe that the calendar has turned and it's too late to you, just to rethink yourself. I was driving in a car one day with a guy, and I was telling him that life doesn't give you do-overs. This is a one-way trip. And we had a great conversation. And he told me, he said, Rufus, I needed to talk with you this morning because he said, I've been in corporate America all of my life. I do very well. I take care of my family and everything else, but I've been working on an invention which I've left alone, and you've ignited me to now go and do what I need to do. And so there's
Yeah,
some people listening now who puts life on hold, and I would
yeah,
tell you, run after it. Nobody else is going to do it, and you will feel so much better, even in the trying. If it's not hugely successful, just the effort will make you feel so much better.
That's great. Thank you very
Absolutely.
much.
You're certainly
I'm going to
welcome.
go ahead and share a screen up here. It is your contact information. And see, I put our 10-year-old names on this for us. So Christy and Butch.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This is our contact information, but just know if you want to reach out to Butch at any time, you can. He's very accessible, and send him an email. His company, Raisin the Rufe Communications, is doing some amazing things. So hopefully you can stay connected with him. I'm going to go ahead and let you go, and I just want
Thank
to
you so
thank you,
much,
let you
Krista.
know how much I appreciate you,
I had
and
a
I'm
ball.
glad we
Thank
met,
you. Same
and
here.
I love your message.
All right.
All
Thanks so
right, thanks.
much. Best to
Yeah,
you. Take care. Bye bye now.
all right. Bye-bye. So I just want to say to everyone, thank you so much for joining the show today, and great subject, and I'm so happy that we were able to have Butch on. We have a little bit of a surprise for you, a little bit of a twist in things for next month. I'm actually going to be the guest, and I'm going to be interviewed on my topic, your 10-year-old self, and get a better understanding where that all came from. Also want you all to know that if you are interested in doing some personal reflection and you want a guide for that, we've created one for the 10-year-old self book. So just email Krista@kcoaching.com, and we will get you the assessment, and it'll start making you think back in your childhood and in your memories to be able to understand what you can do to move forward. So please email me, and I'll be glad to get that to you. It's a little premature because the book isn't published yet, but it's part of the book. So I want to thank you all for joining us, and you have a terrific week. Take care.